They told you from the very beginning that you had a soul, before you could even speak, before you had a single thought of your own. It was already decided for you. You are human and therefore you have a soul. It was embedded into every story, every sermon, every school lesson, every bedtime prayer. The idea was so universal, so unquestioned, that to even doubt it seemed unthinkable. But what if I told you that this comforting belief was never about truth? It was about control. What if the notion that everyone has a soul is one of the most dangerous lies ever told? You've heard it in countless forms, that being human automatically means being sacred, that your life has intrinsic value because there's a divine spark inside you, that every person you've ever met, from the kindest stranger to the darkest tyrant, is just another soul on a unique journey. It's a beautiful idea. It makes the world feel safe, predictable, and fair. But here's the terrifying question most people never dare to ask. What if it's not true? What if millions, maybe even billions of people walking this earth right now look human, speak like you, mimic your emotions, even cry real tears, but inside there's nothing? No soul, no divine spark, no connection to a higher self, just an animated shell running on instinct, routine, and programming. You've probably felt it before, even if you couldn't explain it. That strange emptiness behind someone's eyes. The conversation that felt hollow no matter how many words were exchanged. The person who smiled, laughed, and nodded, yet left you feeling more alone than if no one had been there at all. Something in you whispered, "This isn't real, something's missing," but you buried that intuition because society trained you to dismiss it. This illusion that all humans are equal in soul is one of the most effective psychological tools ever constructed, and it's been used to keep you spiritually blind, emotionally dependent, and energetically compliant. Because if you believe everyone has a soul, then you treat all people as if they have the same depth, the same inner access, the same potential for transcendence. You lower your discernment, you make yourself vulnerable, and you suppress your own awakening to keep the peace. But not everyone followed that script. More than a century ago, a woman named Helena Blavatsky shattered this illusion publicly and paid the price for it. Blavatsky wasn't some fringe mystic scribbling in the shadows. She was a firestorm of intellect, intuition, and esoteric knowledge. A woman who traveled the globe, infiltrated secret orders, and brought back teachings that had been hidden for thousands of years. And among the most disturbing of them was this: not every human being has a soul. To Blavatsky, the soul wasn't automatic. It wasn't handed out at birth like a participation trophy. It was rare, sacred, earned, cultivated through lifetimes of inner work, spiritual discipline, and conscious striving. In her view, a staggering number of people walking among us, though biologically alive, are spiritually vacant. They operate on autopilot. They imitate emotion, they mimic morality, but they do not feel the divine call, they do not reflect, they do not ascend, and most terrifying of all, they do not know what they lack. These ideas weren't speculative for Blavatsky. They were foundational truths drawn from ancient spiritual traditions, the Egyptian mysteries, the Hindu Upanishads, the secret teachings of the Gnostics. Her writings exposed the carefully guarded idea that humanity is not a singular, unified species of awakened souls. It is a mixed field, a spiritual gradient, ranging from fully illuminated beings to spiritual voids wrapped in human form. And for speaking this truth, they tried to silence her, not just with criticism, with campaigns of discrediting, defamation, and exile. Because when someone exposes a lie this massive, it threatens the entire system that depends on that lie for survival. Think about it. If the masses began to accept that not all people possess souls, what would happen? What would it do to society's fragile illusions of equality and order? What would it mean for politics, for religion, for morality? How long before people began drawing lines between the soulful and the soulless? Before fear took root? Before violence followed? You begin to see why this truth had to be buried. And so instead they replaced it with a myth, the myth of universal divinity. A soothing story told in every language in every land, that you and everyone else are equally sacred, that there's no hierarchy in consciousness, that we're all just souls in different costumes. A tale that sells well, keeps people compliant, and makes no one question too deeply. But look around, feel into it. Can you honestly say that every person you've met radiates that same inner depth? That same yearning for truth? That same capacity for introspection, for compassion, for soul-level growth? Or have you noticed the ones who seem strangely vacant? Not evil necessarily, but empty. The ones who live only through imitation, who never ask why, who never change unless forced, who laugh and cry when expected but never from the center of themselves. You're not imagining that. You're glimpsing the edge of a truth your mind has been trained to reject and your soul has been trying to remember. Blavatsky never meant to divide humanity through arrogance. Her warning was not a judgment. It was a wake-up call. Because once you realize that not everyone is like you also realize that you cannot rely on the world's definitions of good, bad, alive, asleep. You must develop your own sight, your own discernment, your own spiritual compass. And that's exactly what the architects of this illusion don't want. They want you asleep, convinced that everyone is just as lost and just as sacred as you, so you never bother to look too closely. So you keep handing your energy to those who only reflect it back to you but never generate their own. So you keep trusting masks, keep loving illusions, keep serving systems that feed on your light without ever offering their own. Because here's the truth they've buried. Once you begin to see the soulless for what they are, you start to see yourself more clearly too. You start to question, have I truly awakened? Or am I still performing the script I was handed? And that's when everything starts to shift. The lie you were told from birth is unraveling, and in its place something raw, ancient, and profoundly unsettling is beginning to surface. But it's also something liberating, because if the soul is not a given, then your pursuit of it becomes the most sacred act of your existence. You've just stepped into a reality most people spend lifetimes avoiding, and from here, there's no going back. From the moment you first heard the words, "We are all one," something inside you wanted to believe it. Maybe it was in a sermon, maybe a teacher said it in a classroom, maybe it was in a song, a movie, or a meditation circle. But wherever you heard it, it settled into your mind as a kind of moral truth. The idea that all human beings, regardless of culture, race, gender, or belief, are not only equal in value but equal in spiritual essence. That every person you pass on the street carries within them the same sacred flame, the same capacity for light, the same divine inheritance. It's a beautiful idea, a necessary idea even, because in a world scarred by separation and conflict, it offers a kind of salve, a philosophical balm to remind us not to judge too harshly, not to forget our shared humanity. It urges compassion, tolerance, and unity. And for a while that belief works. It keeps you open-hearted, it helps you forgive. It gives you a sense of shared purpose in a chaotic world. But then something happens. You start to notice that not everyone acts like a soul in evolution. Some people seem to move through life like actors reading from a script, never deviating, never asking deeper questions. Some treat others as tools, means to an end. Some never reflect, never grow, never yearn for anything beyond routine. You begin to notice conversations that feel empty, gestures that feel rehearsed, smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. And something in you wonders, if we're all made from the same divine essence, why do some seem so hollow? Still, you push the thought away. You've been taught not to question another's soul. You've been conditioned to believe that to see someone as spiritually different, or worse, spiritually vacant, is to commit a moral offense. And so, the myth remains intact. Religion teaches that every human being is a child of God, that each person has a soul given to them by the divine, unique and eternal regardless of their behavior, beliefs, or spiritual awareness. Whether you're a prophet or a prisoner, a monk or a murderer, you are, according to most doctrines, equally soul-possessing. This idea was never meant to be questioned. It became a foundation for how people were to be treated, judged, and governed. And to challenge it was to risk being labeled as cruel, elitist, or even heretical. Science, in its own way, reinforced the myth from another angle. While not dealing in souls, it insisted on another form of equality, the biological kind. We are all made of the same cells, atoms, genes. Consciousness, according to materialists, is just a byproduct of brain activity. There's no hierarchy of spirit, only neurological patterns and evolutionary development. Everyone, they say, is equally human, equally capable, equally real. The suggestion that some people might lack the internal depth of others, that some might operate as imitations rather than as conscious beings, is dismissed as pseudoscience, even madness. And then there's the media, the ever-persistent storyteller of the modern world. It feeds you endless narratives of equality, that all voices are valid, all perspectives sacred, that to question another's authenticity is to risk the worst of modern accusations: arrogance, intolerance, hatred. Representation, inclusion, and unity, these are the values constantly promoted. And while there's beauty in that, there's also a blinding effect, because when every character in the story is said to be equally sacred, it becomes nearly impossible to recognize who is actually awake and who is simply playing the part. You've been told that seeing spiritual difference is judgment, that to discern who carries soul and who does not is to become divisive, cold, inhumane. But what if the opposite is true? What if the refusal to acknowledge these spiritual differences is what keeps us collectively asleep? There is a reason this illusion has been so carefully protected, because it's not just a nice idea, it's a mechanism of control. Think about it. If everyone believes they are equal in spirit, then society becomes predictable. There's no need for inner striving, no pressure to awaken, no urgency to evolve. You're already perfect because you already have a soul, just like everyone else. It becomes a spiritual sedation, a way to keep people docile, uninspired, and easily herded into systems that rely on sameness. Governments thrive on this belief. After all, it justifies equal treatment, equal taxation, equal submission. Religions require it to keep their congregations loyal and obedient. If every person is just as sacred as the next, then everyone needs saving, and everyone needs the institution to do it. Even schools subtly echo the myth. Everyone is equal in potential. Everyone can succeed. Everyone is special. It's a system designed to uplift, but also to flatten. Now pause. What if this narrative wasn't built to honor the sacred in all people, but to hide the fact that some people never awaken at all? What if spiritual equality isn't a truth, but a comforting illusion designed to protect us from the unbearable reality that not everyone is like you, that some are simply playing human, mimicking life without truly experiencing it? Ask yourself this: if every person truly possessed a soul, why are so few of them drawn to the path of self-discovery? Why do most resist change, avoid reflection, and live their lives in surface-level repetition? Why do so many recoil at silence, avoid depth, and fear truth? You've probably seen it. The way people cling to distractions, the way they follow trends without question, the way they adopt beliefs not through contemplation but through social programming. When you try to speak about purpose, consciousness, or inner transformation, they either nod politely or change the subject entirely. There's a gap, a missing resonance, a quiet but deafening absence. And it's in that absence that the myth begins to crack, because if you were to really look closely, without the filters of doctrine, dogma, or political correctness, you'd begin to sense that something is off, that some people seem to operate from a depth you can feel in your bones, while others do not, that some are moved by beauty, truth, and higher vision, and some are moved only by habit, pleasure, and external approval. It's not about superiority, it's not about worth, it's about presence. Some carry the weight of lifetimes. You can feel it in their eyes, in their silence, in the way they speak without trying to impress. Others feel blank, pleasant, functional, even impressive, but hollow in a way that your intuition never quite trusts. This isn't a reason for hatred. It's not a call for division. It's an invitation to see, to step beyond the illusions that have been fed to you since birth and begin noticing what has always been there. Spiritual variance, layers of evolution, a spectrum of consciousness, not a uniform blanket of equality. Because maybe, just maybe, not everyone is here to wake up. And once you allow yourself to see that possibility, everything changes. You stop giving your energy to empty interactions. You stop expecting depth from those who have never known it. You stop blaming yourself for the disconnection you feel and start listening to it. The comforting myth begins to fade, and in its place something far more powerful begins to emerge. Discernment. Not to judge, but to recognize. Not to condemn, but to awaken. Because if some are spiritually empty, then your responsibility becomes clear. To stop playing along with the illusion and start becoming what most never will. You've passed them in the grocery store, sat next to them in meetings, even shared meals with them. They laugh at the right times, say all the expected things, dress well, hold conversations, and even express emotions. But something never quite settles when you're around them. There's a feeling, a subtle, almost imperceptible discomfort that hums just beneath the surface. It doesn't show up in their words or actions, but in the strange emptiness behind their eyes. You can't explain it, but you've felt it. Something's missing. What you're sensing in those moments is the difference between a soul and a shell. The idea sounds dramatic, maybe even impossible, because you've been taught to believe that if a being is alive, walking, talking, breathing, then it must be animated by the same essence that animates you. But that assumption confuses biology with consciousness. It conflates the mechanics of life with the presence of inner life. And once you begin to truly question that assumption, a new and unsettling reality begins to unfold. Not all who walk among us are spiritually alive. An animated shell is not a demon or a monster. It is a human body, a perfectly functioning one, that mimics the traits of consciousness without ever having touched its source. It eats, sleeps, works, and interacts. It feels emotions, but those emotions are mechanical, reactive, surface level. It may even display intelligence, talent, charm, and empathy, but these qualities are borrowed, performed, recycled from the collective environment. There is no I behind the mask, no observer behind the experience, only patterns. Imagine a perfectly constructed mannequin that moves, speaks, and reacts based on everything it's absorbed from the world around it. That is the essence of the animated shell. It exists, yes, but only in a superficial sense. It imitates what it sees. It adapts to trends. It repeats ideas. It reacts according to programming. But it never initiates from within. There is no inwardness, no core, no true self. And the strangest part is, most people can't see the difference. They don't want to, because seeing it forces them to confront the uncomfortable truth that human doesn't always mean soulful, that form does not guarantee depth, that biology is not evidence of being. To be biologically alive is to have a body that functions, organs that pump, lungs that breathe, neurons that fire. But to be spiritually alive is something else entirely. It is to possess an interior light, a yearning, a capacity to suffer for truth, to sacrifice for meaning, to rise beyond the instinctual and enter the transcendent. It is to contain within you a question that never fully goes away, the question of who you truly are and why you are here. Animated shells never ask that question. They live entirely in the external. Their concerns orbit the same shallow cycles: survival, status, stimulation. They don't contemplate the soul because they don't feel the absence of one. They don't seek the divine because they've never known it. You cannot long for what you've never tasted, and for the soulless, there is no hunger for higher awareness. Only the quiet hunger to belong, to be seen, to fit in. It's not evil, it's empty. And that emptiness is deceiving, because many shells are highly functional. They hold prestigious jobs. They become celebrities, influencers, politicians. They speak well. They charm crowds. They may even move others emotionally. But everything they do is reactive, drawn from the environment, shaped by external cues, dictated by what works rather than what is true. They can mimic brilliance but not create it. They can imitate love but not embody it. Their entire existence is borrowed. You may have mistaken some for enlightened simply because they knew the right words. They spoke about energy, love, authenticity. They wore the right colors, attended the right events, followed the right spiritual trends. But something in you felt off, a hollowness that their vocabulary couldn't hide, a mechanical quality beneath their flowery phrases. They could say, "I love you," but it was a script. It lacked the quiet fire you feel when a real soul speaks. That feeling is your compass. When you meet a soul-bearing being, there's a resonance, a depth that doesn't need to prove itself. You feel it in their silence more than in their words, in the way they listen, in the way they suffer consciously, in the way they strive to be more than they were yesterday, not because it's trendy, but because something ancient and sacred inside them is pulling them forward. A soul-bearing being doesn't need to impress you. They don't follow trends. They often stand alone. They question what others accept. They feel out of place in a world obsessed with the surface, and they are willing to suffer for what is real. That's how you know. The animated shell, by contrast, is comfortable. It flows with the current. It mirrors what's popular. It adopts identities rather than discovers them. It wears masks, not out of malice, but because it has nothing underneath, and the mask becomes its personality. This is why so many of your interactions may have left you feeling unseen, unheard, untouched. You were trying to connect with someone who had no depth to meet you with. You reached out with soul, and they responded with a performance. You craved authenticity, and they gave you replication. Not because they were being cruel, but because they had no self from which to offer something true. And here's the secret no one talked about. Not all shells are obvious. Some appear deeply emotional, some cry easily, some seem spiritual. But their emotion is not rooted in introspection. It's reactive, situational, often performative. Their spirituality is not born from revelation, it's mimicry, copied from books or borrowed from mentors. You can only see the difference when you slow down, when you stop being impressed by expression and start feeling for essence. Because essence cannot be faked. An animated shell will always betray itself eventually. In the way they avoid silence, in the way they become uncomfortable with depth, in the way they lose interest when the conversation turns inward. They do not know themselves, not because they are hiding, but because there's nothing beneath the surface to discover. You were taught to treat everyone the same, to assume that each person is simply a soul at a different stage. But this assumption, while noble, can also be dangerous, because it blinds you to the real distinctions that matter, not outer appearances, but inner reality, not how someone behaves, but from where that behavior originates. Is it imitation, or is it revelation? This is the world we live in, a strange blend of the soul-bearing and the soulless, the awakened and the automatic, the seekers and the shells. And the more you awaken, the more this difference becomes painfully obvious. You can no longer lie to yourself, you can no longer ignore the hollowness in their voices, the vacancy in their rituals, the way they drift through life untouched by wonder, by silence, by the sacred. And you realize that not everyone is here to remember. Not everyone is here to awaken. Some are simply here to keep the system running, and nothing more. The distinction is not meant to breed superiority, it's meant to clarify. Because once you see the shells for what they are, you stop expecting them to be something they are not. You stop trying to reach them where there is no one to reach. And most importantly, you turn your gaze inward and ask, am I living as a soul? Or am I just another shell? Polished, performative, asleep. Because the only thing more tragic than meeting an animated shell is being one. Long before modern religions claimed ownership of the soul, before textbooks reduced it to metaphor and pulpits sanctified it as divine inheritance, there were older voices, ancient traditions that whispered a deeper, more mysterious truth. The soul, in their teachings, was not a given. It wasn't something bestowed upon you the moment you took your first breath. It wasn't automatic, guaranteed, or universal. According to the most esoteric lineages of wisdom, the soul is a rare fire, and most never ignite it. In the ancient systems of Hermeticism, Theosophy, and early Eastern mysticism, the soul was not equated with the body. The body, they taught, was a temporary vessel, a tool, a mask worn in the theater of incarnation. And what animated that body wasn't always the immortal soul, but something subtler, something more primitive. Life force, or prana. Prana flows through all living things. It's the energy that allows trees to grow, animals to hunt, and humans to breathe. But prana is not consciousness. Prana sustains function. The soul, however, is awareness, identity, aspiration. That inner flame which reflects the divine. The Hermetic texts, attributed to the mythic figure Hermes Trismegistus, described humanity not as a unified species of soul-bearing beings, but as a layered hierarchy of evolving consciousness. Some humans, they said, were just beginning the long journey inward. Others had ascended through countless lifetimes of striving, reflection, and transformation, and still others had not yet even begun. To call everyone equal in soul was, to the Hermetics, not only false, it was dangerous, because it blinded the seeker to the reality of inner development, to the sacred and necessary work of becoming. Blavatsky carried these teachings forward with a fiery clarity. In her writings, particularly The Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled, she drew from a vast mosaic of esoteric traditions, Tibetan Buddhism, Hindu Vedanta, Egyptian mysticism, and Western alchemy, to reveal a far more complex picture of the human being than society was ready to accept. And central to that picture was her radical claim: the soul is not automatically present in all humans at birth. This claim was not meant to diminish anyone's worth. It wasn't about spiritual elitism or condemnation. It was about truth. According to Blavatsky, To possess a soul in the truest sense meant to have developed an individualized consciousness, a center of spiritual identity that persists beyond death and incarnates again and again with awareness. Not everyone, she said, had reached that point. Many live and die driven only by instinct, culture, and imitation, without ever awakening to that deeper center. In other words, being human biologically does not make one human spiritually. The soul is not fused to the body like a ghost in a machine. It must be earned. It must be cultivated. And that cultivation does not happen in a single lifetime. It happens across many. Theosophy, the spiritual science that Blavatsky helped to found, views existence as a series of evolutionary stages, not just of the body but of the spirit. Just as an embryo becomes a child, and a child becomes an adult, so too does consciousness evolve over cosmic time. The soul is like a seed planted in the field of experience, and as with all seeds, some germinate quickly, others take centuries, and some never sprout at all. In this framework, the soul isn't a static possession, it's a process, an unfolding, a flame that starts as a spark and must be fed with discipline, suffering, joy, and insight. It is forged in the crucible of choice, deepened through failure, refined through sacrifice. And it is only through repeated lifetimes, each one offering a new chance to remember, to choose differently, to go deeper, that the soul begins to take shape. To live without that cultivation is to live on autopilot. It is to be driven by primal instincts, hunger, fear, pleasure, survival, rather than spiritual aspiration. And it is entirely possible, according to these traditions, to go through entire lifetimes this way, to look, speak, and act like a person, but to be, inwardly, empty. Not in a cruel sense, but in an undeveloped one. Blavatsky warned that many people exist as embryonic souls. They have the potential, but not yet the realization. They are at the earliest stages of spiritual development, and until the spark within them is awakened through self-awareness, reflection, and voluntary striving, they remain incomplete. Like clay not yet molded, they have form but no identity, motion but no direction. She also described a more chilling possibility that some forms may never awaken, that given enough lifetimes of stagnation, of rejecting growth, of avoiding discomfort and refusing truth, some beings may become spiritually inert. The soul seed, if ignored long enough, dries out. And once the great cosmic cycles move forward, these forms are left behind, not punished but pruned, like branches that no longer bear fruit. This is why the ancient teachings were so insistent on personal effort. You were never meant to assume your soul was fully formed, you were meant to forge it, in fire, in silence, in longing. It is the most sacred work there is. And in a world that tells you you're already complete just by being alive, this message can feel like a slap to the face. But it's a necessary one. Because if you believe the soul is simply a birthright, you have no reason to seek, no urgency to change, no hunger to know who you truly are. But if you realize that the soul is something you must build, something you must discover layer by layer through experience, then every moment becomes sacred, every choice becomes weighty, every relationship, every loss, every joy becomes part of the sacred alchemy of becoming. That's what the ancients knew and what modernity has forgotten, that the soul is not a product of belief, but of effort, not a handout from the divine, but a fire you must kindle in the darkness of your own being. And it is this fire, not your name, not your memories, not even your body, that determines who you are beyond this life. Blavatsky didn't say these things to condemn others. She said them because she had seen too much. She had studied with adepts in the East, initiated into secret teachings in the West, and what she found, repeated in every tradition, was this: not all who appear alive are spiritually awake, and not all who are awake were born that way. The soul is not your identity. It is your direction. It is not a possession, it is a journey, a becoming. And the tragedy of modern life is that we have traded that journey for comfort, for certainty, for the pleasing lie that says everyone is already whole, already sacred, already realized. But look around. Does the world look like a place full of realized souls? Do you feel the fire of divine presence in every interaction? Or do you sense, as Blavatsky did, a deeper divide, one that cannot be explained by politics, psychology, or culture? That divide is not between good and evil, rich and poor, this religion or that. It is between the awake and the unawakened. the forged and the unformed, the soulful and the soulless. And once you understand this, everything changes. You stop assuming, you start seeing, you realize that the presence of a soul is not something to take for granted in others or in yourself. Because the truth is, you were not born with a soul, you were born with the possibility of one, and what you do with that possibility is the most important choice you'll ever make, in this life and in all the lives to come. They look like you, they move like you, they occupy the same cities, shop at the same stores, work in the same offices. They sit across from you in coffee shops, share jokes at dinner tables, raise children, build companies, rise to power. And yet, something about them doesn't feel entirely human. Not in the biological sense, but in the spiritual. There's a void where there should be presence, a script where there should be substance, a reflection where there should be origin. Helena Blavatsky called them the machine men. It's a term that unnerves, as it should, not because it implies gears and wires, but because it reveals something even more disconcerting, that entire lives can be lived through mimicry, through reflex, through programming, without ever touching the essence of what it means to be truly alive. The machine man is not a monster. They are not evil in the dramatic storybook sense. They are not cruel for cruelty's sake. They are instead hollow, fully operational, yet spiritually inert. Blavatsky wasn't speaking about robots. She was speaking about people who live entirely through borrowed patterns, people who act not from self-reflection but from imitation, people who feel, but only reactively, who love, but only on the surface, who succeed, but without ever asking why. Their personalities are collections of societal norms, cultural cues, family beliefs, survival mechanisms. They don't develop themselves, they download themselves, and once installed, the program runs day after day, year after year, often for an entire lifetime. Machine men don't question the source of their impulses. They don't wonder why they believe what they believe, desire what they desire, or fear what they fear. They simply follow the script laid before them, a script written by others, internalized without resistance. If a thought is fashionable, they adopt it. If an idea is rewarded socially, they defend it. If a behavior garners praise, they repeat it. Their inner world is not cultivated, it's constructed, not through effort or insight, but through absorption. They can be charming, they can be articulate, they can be wildly successful in conventional terms, but their actions are always external, their motivations always transactional, their values always borrowed. It's not that they lack emotion entirely, it's that their emotions are mechanical, conditioned responses to environmental stimuli. A child cries, and they comfort them, not from a wellspring of compassion, but because it's what good people are supposed to do. A tragedy strikes, and they grieve, not from inner devastation, but because it's the expected human reaction. Their empathy is real only in performance. It lacks the depth of conscious presence. And you've felt the difference, haven't you? You've been in the presence of someone who says all the right things but leaves you feeling emptier than before. Someone who smiles with precision but never truly sees you. Someone whose words echo emotion but whose energy is flat, vacant, scripted. These are the moments where the soul senses the absence, where something inside you detects the uncanny valley of human imitation. The gestures are right, but the origin is missing. You're not engaging with a self, you're engaging with a set of responses. Machine men are not rare. In fact, they are startlingly common. In a society built on efficiency, predictability, and control, they thrive. Systems reward them, corporations promote them, governments depend on them. Because they don't question, they don't resist, they perform roles flawlessly, driven by fear of exclusion and the promise of reward. Their identities are optimized for approval, not authenticity, and the more asleep the world becomes, the more room machine men have to rise. It's why so many of the most visible figures in our world, celebrities, politicians, influencers, often feel hollow despite their charisma. They project emotion with precision, they champion causes, they perform humanity with flair, but watch closely. There's no soul hunger in their eyes, no spiritual weight behind their words, no suffering-born wisdom, no light of realization, just a refined ability to reflect what others want to see. They are mirrors without depth, channels without awareness. And here's the deeper tragedy. Many of them believe they are fully alive. Because the machine man doesn't know he's a machine. He believes the program is him. He believes his reactions are authenticity, his instincts are wisdom, his opinions are truth. He cannot separate thought from thinker, because he has never observed either. He is not lying, he is unaware. And that is what makes the machine man not a villain, but a warning. A warning of what happens when a life goes unexamined. When a being born with the potential for soul chooses instead the comfort of conformity. When the mirror is never turned inward. When pain is numbed instead of transmuted. When the questions that lead to awakening are silenced by the roar of distraction. The machine man is the final form of unawareness. A being that has learned to survive in every way but one. Spiritually. Blavatsky didn't introduce this term to vilify. She introduced it to awaken. To name what so many feel but cannot describe. To give shape to the void you've encountered in faces that seemed human, but left you feeling unseen. She was not the first to speak of them. The Gnostics called them hylics, beings driven only by matter, devoid of pneuma, the spiritual breath. The Vedic sages described similar categories, those who had not yet awakened the Atman within. Even the Bible hints at them, having the form of godliness but denying the power thereof. The implications are vast. If machine men can rise to power, if they can marry, teach, govern, inspire, then you must learn to discern not by words, but by essence. Not by the glow of the mask, but by the fire behind the eyes. You must listen not to what people say, but to what vibrates beneath their presence. And most terrifying of all, you must ask, where have I been a machine man in my own life? Because this isn't just about others, this is a mirror for you too. Have you lived reactively? Have you pursued goals handed to you without question? Have you performed compassion rather than embodied it? Have you adopted spiritual language without touching spiritual truth? Have you mistaken mimicry for mastery? The machine man is not an enemy, he is a state of being, one that many pass through and some never leave. He is what happens when the soul is neglected, when survival is prioritized over truth, when appearances replace substance, and when the world rewards masks more than it honors essence. But you, watching this now, hearing these words, you are not a machine. Because a machine does not stop to question. A machine does not wrestle with meaning. A machine does not ache to become more. And that ache is the beginning of your soul. There's a reason you've never heard this truth from a pulpit, never seen it taught in a classroom, never watched it explored on the evening news. The idea that not all people possess a soul, that some are spiritually inert, empty, or undeveloped, is not only controversial, it's dangerous. Not because it's false, but because it threatens the very foundations of the systems that govern your life. It shatters the myth of sameness. It breaks the spell of collective illusion. And when illusions break, control becomes harder to maintain. The suppression of this teaching has nothing to do with protecting morality. It has everything to do with protecting power. Because if people begin to truly understand that humanity is not a singular, spiritually unified species, if they begin to discern between those who carry soul and those who merely simulate life, then the structures built on mass obedience begin to tremble. Religion, for one, cannot afford for this truth to be accepted. Its doctrines are built on the promise that all souls are equal in the eyes of God, that every person, regardless of consciousness or character, has been granted a soul and a place in the divine plan. This universal message creates a comforting narrative, one that makes churches full, donations flow, and faith remain unchallenged. But if that narrative collapses, so does the structure built upon it. If people start to realize that the soul must be cultivated, that it's not simply gifted at birth, then salvation becomes a matter of inner work, not external allegiance. And that threatens organized religion profoundly. It means spiritual authority doesn't belong to the clergy, but to the individual. It means dogma becomes irrelevant in the face of direct experience. It means that the quiet mystic in solitude may possess more soul than the priest in the pulpit. That kind of realization is spiritual rebellion, and the guardians of tradition have always feared it. Then there's science, the modern high priest of truth. It dismisses the entire conversation out of hand. To mainstream science, there is no soul. There is only brain chemistry, biological wiring, evolution, and inherited behavior. If something cannot be measured, weighed, or replicated in a lab, it is deemed unworthy of exploration. The very concept of a soul, let alone the distinction between soul-bearing and soulless humans, is labeled as pseudoscience or superstition. But this dismissal is not neutral, it serves a purpose. Because if consciousness is seen as nothing more than a byproduct of neural activity, then every person is just a complex machine. And machines are predictable, manageable, replaceable. Science, when divorced from spirituality, becomes the perfect tool for institutional control. It strips away mystery, denies inner depth, and reduces you to data points on a chart. And when you're data, you're easy to manipulate. But imagine what happens if you step outside that framework. Imagine if people began to awaken to the truth that some human beings are deeply connected to a higher essence, while others are not. That the inner worlds of people vary not just in content, but in dimension. That some operate from a divine center, and others from reflex. That not all minds are conduits for spirit. Suddenly the tidy systems of equality, governance, and universal laws begin to fracture. And politics? Politics needs sameness more than any other system. It thrives on the illusion that all citizens are equal, not just in rights, but in awareness, in capacity, in spiritual value. It insists that the will of the masses reflects a shared humanity. It depends on the narrative that every voice counts equally, every person is just as aware, just as informed, just as capable of conscious decision-making. But when you introduce the idea that many people are running on autopilot, that they lack the self-awareness, the spiritual fire, or even the inner silence to question what they're being told, that system begins to wobble. Because mass consensus is no longer a sign of truth, it becomes a sign of programming. The soulless, or machine men, are easier to govern. They follow orders, they obey norms, they consume, conform, and comply. They are the perfect constituents, no questions, no rebellion, just noise, momentum, and reaction. The souled, on the other hand, those who have begun to awaken, are dangerous. Not because they're violent, but because they see. And once you see, you can't unsee. You begin to notice the scripts people repeat, the thoughts they didn't think for themselves, the feelings they simulate because it's what's expected. You begin to recognize the machinery of modern life, how entertainment distracts, how media programs, how education molds. You begin to sense the quiet, coordinated effort to keep you asleep. And you begin to wonder, why were we taught this illusion in the first place? The answer is as old as control itself. Knowledge divides. Not in the way that oppressors divide and conquer, not in hatred or exclusion, but in sight, in clarity. When you awaken, you begin to separate truth from performance, essence from appearance, depth from mimicry. You start to move differently. You stop playing along. You stop wasting energy on those who cannot reflect it. You begin to gather your awareness, your time, your light, and direct it where it matters. That's what makes this knowledge dangerous. It leads to power. Not power over others, but power over yourself, over your choices, over your soul's path. And systems built on conformity cannot survive a populace that becomes self-possessed. So the truth must be buried. That's why Helena Blavatsky was ridiculed, censored, and dismissed. Not because her ideas were incoherent, but because they were radioactive. Because she cracked open the illusion and let the light in. She dared to say what others only felt, that not all people are on the same level of consciousness, and that pretending otherwise is spiritual suicide. Her teachings threatened the institutions that depend on mass spiritual equality, and so she was labeled as dangerous. Her writings were twisted, her character assassinated, her message diluted. The same fate met many others who spoke of these truths. Gurdjieff, Steiner, Manly P. Hall. They were all cast to the edges, turned into curiosities rather than prophets, because they challenged the myth that keeps the machine running. And you have to ask yourself, if the truth were harmless, why would they go to such lengths to hide it? Because the moment you understand this truth, really understand it, you change. Your eyes change. Your energy changes. You no longer believe the story you were fed. You begin to speak less, observe more, feel deeper. You start asking questions that unsettle people. You start moving away from noise, from crowds, from the false assurance of belonging, and you start seeking the rare, quiet resonance of real soul. That is why this knowledge was hidden, not because it's cruel, but because it liberates. And when enough people remember, when enough eyes begin to see through the illusion, the world doesn't just shift, it fractures. The veil lifts, the scripts dissolve, the systems wobble, and For the first time, perhaps in lifetimes, you stand face to face with the truth. That not everyone is what they seem, and that awakening is not a collective guarantee, it is an individual choice, and you just made it. You've felt it before, that strange sense that something is off, but you couldn't put your finger on it. The way someone looked at you but didn't see you. The way their voice carried the right words but none of the presence. The way time seemed to slow down when you were around them, not in a sacred way but in a draining, empty way. Like standing next to a beautiful statue, perfectly formed, yet lifeless, and you've told yourself to forget it, to let it go, that it's just your imagination, or you're being too sensitive. But what if you weren't wrong? What if that eerie feeling was trying to show you something real? There's a presence some people carry, a stillness, a gravity, a kind of inward depth that doesn't need to be announced. You feel it not just in what they say, but in how they listen. Not in how much they know, but in how clearly they reflect. Being around them awakens something in you. A deeper breath, a calmer pulse, an urge to tell the truth. They aren't trying to impress or dominate or perform. They are simply there, fully, and their very presence reminds you that you too are something more than your thoughts. Then, there are the others. They may be louder, more charming, always ready with a compliment, a joke, or a piece of advice. They seem interested, they nod, they smile, but behind it all, you feel a void, a strange hollowness, a conversation that goes nowhere no matter how long it lasts. You walk away wondering why you feel more tired than before, why you feel unseen, like something important in you was missed entirely, not rejected but bypassed. These are the moments your soul tries to speak, because what you're encountering is not just a personality mismatch. It's not a bad vibe or social awkwardness or even narcissism. It is something deeper, a lack of depth itself, an absence of inner substance. A life form that moves, reacts, emotes, but does not reflect, does not feel the way you do, does not hold the sacred weight of self-awareness. This is not about labeling people, it's not about ego or superiority or exclusion, it's about recognition. Not judgment, recognition. The recognition that not every human form carries the same spiritual spark, that some are still becoming, some are still empty, and some may never awaken at all. The soulless, or what some esoteric teachings call empty vessels or animated shells, are not always easy to spot. They are not villains. They don't walk around cloaked in darkness. In fact, many of them are well-dressed, well-liked, and well-rehearsed. They've learned how to fit in. They've learned what emotion looks like. They've learned how to mirror social cues, repeat spiritual language, and wear the right masks at the right time, but something in them doesn't reach all the way down. Start by paying attention to their words. You'll notice that their conversations stay on the surface. Even when the topic is deep, they treat it like trivia. They might talk about meditation, philosophy, or consciousness, but never from the inside. Their insights feel second-hand. Quoted, not lived. You can tell the difference. When a soul speaks, it's not trying to impress you, it's revealing itself. There's a trembling sincerity in it, a kind of weight. But when a shell speaks, it's performance. It's sound without source, movement without meaning. Then look at their eyes, not the shape or color, the presence. Do they meet you, or do they scan you like data? There's something haunting about the gaze of the soulless, not evil, just vacant. Like the lights are on, but no one is truly home. They may laugh, they may cry, but none of it seems anchored to anything real. You may even notice that when you speak from your heart, they fidget, change the subject, offer a quick fix, because the realness of your presence makes them uncomfortable. They can't match it, they can only mimic. Then there's their relationship to silence. True soul-bearing people are at ease in silence. In fact, they often prefer it, because silence is where the soul speaks loudest. But shells fear it. They fill it with noise, with chatter, entertainment, movement. They can't sit still for long. They need distraction, because when things get quiet, their emptiness becomes too loud. You may also find that these people never seem to change. Oh, they may move jobs, change partners, adopt new beliefs, but the core of who they are remains fixed, not in a strong, grounded way, but in a lifeless, stagnant way. They recycle the same patterns, the same stories, the same reactive behaviors. There's no inner evolution, no alchemical fire, just repetition. And then there's the way they make you feel. This is perhaps the most telling of all. Around soul-bearing beings you feel more like yourself, more open, more inspired. Even when it's uncomfortable, it's alive. But around the soulless, you feel drained, not attacked but quietly erased. Your inner light dims, your enthusiasm fades. You start to question your own energy, your own presence. This is your spirit responding to the void, the nation of life without the source. You've probably tried to explain this to someone before. Maybe you said, "I just don't vibe with them," or "they seem fake," or "I don't know, something just feels off." And the people around you may have brushed it off, told you not to be judgmental, told you you're being too sensitive. But your intuition was right. Your soul knew what your mind couldn't explain. Because you weren't just picking up on personality, you were sensing the absence of essence. This is not about creating enemies. It's not about placing yourself above others. That is the trap the ego sets, to take spiritual sight and turn it into spiritual arrogance. But this path requires the opposite, humility. Because if you can spot the soulless, it means you carry something they do not. And with that comes responsibility. To recognize the absence of soul in others means you must cultivate the presence of soul within yourself. You must live awake. You must speak from truth. You must suffer consciously, love deeply, and refuse to perform. You must be what they cannot be, not for superiority, but for remembrance. Because once you see it, truly see it, you will start noticing it everywhere, in the crowds, in the conversations, in the roles people play with mechanical precision. And it can feel isolating, lonely, like you're walking through a world of shadows wearing a heart too bright. But you are not alone. There are others, souls recognizing souls, quietly, wordlessly, gathering. This is not a war. It's not a revolution of noise. It's a quiet uprising of consciousness, a reclamation of what is real. And it begins with sight, the ability to look past the mask and feel the presence, or the absence, beneath it. So trust your unease. Trust that eerie feeling. It is not a flaw. It is your soul's compass, and it was never meant to be silenced. It was meant to lead you home. Not everything that moves is alive in the truest sense. Not everything that breathes carries within it the spark of conscious selfhood. This is a truth so subtle, so radical that most people live their entire lives without ever glimpsing it. Because we have been taught to equate movement with life, instinct with spirit, and activity with awareness. But ancient teachings, those hidden beneath layers of cultural conditioning and intellectual noise, draw a line, a sacred and often terrifying line between what is animated and what is aware. That line is the difference between prana and soul. Prana is the life force, the breath of nature, the animating energy that flows through all things. It's what allows the seed to sprout, the animal to hunt, the wind to move. It is pure vitality. Intelligent in its own way, responsive to conditions, bound to cycles. Prana sustains the machinery of existence. Without it, nothing grows, nothing moves, nothing pulses with rhythm. But prana is not you. It is not self-aware. It does not question. It does not suffer meaningfully. It does not evolve by choice. It simply flows. You share prana with every blade of grass, every bird in flight, every wave that crashes against the shore. And so do the so-called machine men, those who walk among us with human faces and functioning bodies but who never reach inward. Their breath, their hunger, their speech, their motion, all of it is powered by prana. But that doesn't mean they possess a soul. This is the distinction most modern people cannot or will not make, because we have collapsed prana and soul into one. If something can speak, feel, react, love, it must be conscious, right? It must have depth. It must carry the same sacred interior that we do. But that's not how the ancient mystics saw it. In the traditions of Theosophy, Vedanta, Hermeticism, and esoteric Buddhism, prana is universal but impersonal. It moves through everything that exists, yet it does not belong to anything. It is borrowed, not possessed. A flame that burns where conditions allow, but that can never become conscious on its own. You do not own prana. You are animated by it. But the soul, that's something else entirely. The soul is not mere energy. It is identity, not egoic identity, not the false I built by the world, but the deep, unshakable presence that knows itself without name, title, or history. The soul is the part of you that stands in silence and watches. It suffers, meaningfully. It remembers beyond time. It yearns not just to exist, but to become. The soul is not content to survive. It wants to know, to grow, to awaken. This is the vital distinction. Prana moves, the soul yearns. You can see prana in the way a tiger stalks its prey, in the way a vine reaches for the sun. You can see it in the grace of dancers, the reflex of athletes, the instinct of children. But that doesn't mean soul is present. Those movements are beautiful, but they're often reactive. They follow the rhythm of nature, not the call of the inner self. Now think of those moments in your own life when something inside you ached for more. Not more pleasure, more status, more comfort, but more truth. Think of the questions that haunted you at night. Who am I, really? Why am I here? What does all of this mean? That's not prana. That's soul. Because only the soul questions. Only the soul doubts. Only the soul seeks something beyond instinct and reward. And that's what separates it from the rest of life. Plants don't seek meaning. Animals don't meditate. Machine men don't wonder who they are beneath the role. They function. Sometimes gracefully, sometimes chaotically, but always within the boundaries of their programming. There's no interior rebellion, no divine discontent, just movement. That divine discontent, that sacred ache, is the mark of soul. And it doesn't show up just because someone is breathing, talking, emoting. You've met people who seem fully alive on the outside, but inwardly there is no movement, no hunger, no reach. You speak to them of transformation and they nod politely, then return to their routines. You share your struggles, your insights, your revelations, and they respond with shallow affirmations or discomforted silence. It's not that they're cruel, it's that they're asleep, or worse, never truly awake to begin with. Because prana can imitate soul, it can replicate behavior, it can even mimic emotion. It's responsive after all. Feed it a story and it will cry. Feed it music and it will dance. Feed it conflict and it will react. But it cannot initiate awareness. It cannot turn itself inward and witness its own movement. It cannot evolve by choice. That is the exclusive domain of the soul. This is why some people can excel in every outer domain, career, family, status, even community leadership, and still feel hollow, because success powered by prana is empty without soul. It becomes performance. You climb the ladder, only to realize the ladder was resting against the wrong wall. You win the game, only to find out you were never really playing. On the other hand, the soul-bearing individual may appear lost by worldly standards. They may struggle, wander, question, suffer, but underneath that chaos something sacred is unfolding. They are burning away illusions. They are becoming real. Their suffering is not wasted. It is alchemical. It transforms them not into something better, but into something true. And once you see this, you can never again confuse the two. You can no longer be dazzled by charisma, credentials, or emotional display. You begin to feel into people. You begin to sense whether there is something behind their words, a silent depth, a trembling awareness, or whether they are simply repeating what they've heard, reacting as they were conditioned to. This is not about dividing the world into us versus them. It's about seeing the spectrum clearly, understanding that most beings operate through prana alone, and that this is not wrong, it is simply the stage they are at. A baby is not judged for being unable to walk, but a soul must walk, must choose to walk, or it withers. Because prana is temporary, it will leave the body. It will return to the source. But the soul carries forward, not as memory but as momentum, as essence. So the real question isn't, do I have a soul? It's, am I living from it? Because even those born with the potential for soul can live as shells. Even those with the seed can refuse the watering. The gift is not possession. The gift is the possibility. And you, hearing these words, feeling their weight, you are not here by accident. You are a soul remembering itself. And that remembrance is the very thing prana cannot do. That is what makes you different. And it's time you honored that difference. You've been told you're human because you were born with a body. Because you have a name, a family, a culture. You eat, sleep, laugh, cry, you go to school, get a job, maybe raise children, chase dreams, grow old. You fulfill the script. And so, by every worldly measure, you are human. But what if none of that truly defines what it means to be human? What if being born in a human form is only the beginning, not the destination? The ancient teachings all agree on one thing. Biological humanity is not the same as spiritual humanity. You are not human simply because your body walks upright, speaks a language, and belongs to a species. You become truly human only when something inside you awakens, when your identity shifts from the surface of your existence to the depths of your being, when your awareness pierces through the veil of personality and remembers that you are not this shell, but the flame within it. To be human in form is common. To be human in soul is rare. This is the forgotten truth, the one that modern life has buried beneath layers of convenience, conformity, and consumerism. You've been conditioned to believe that everyone is the same, that every person you meet carries the same capacity for empathy, wisdom, growth, and awareness. But you know that's not true. You've seen it, you've felt it. You've met people who are kind, yes, but mechanical. People who show emotion, but only on cue. People who speak of love, but cannot embody it. You've watched them operate with perfect surface-level humanity, and yet something within you sensed they were missing the very thing that makes us human in the truest sense, the presence of a soul that knows itself. And then there are those rare beings, not always loud, not always polished, whose presence strikes you like lightning. Something in them burns, not because they've memorized wisdom, but because they are wisdom in motion, not because they've mastered appearance, but because their very existence radiates inner work. They carry a weight, a depth, a stillness. You can feel the years, perhaps even the lifetimes of struggle, of seeking, of sacrifice, all pressed into the way they speak, the way they hold silence, the way they look at you and see you. That is what it means to be human, not to perform it, not to be told you are it, but to earn it through fire. Because the soul is not granted like a prize, it is forged like a sword. In heat, in pressure, in pain, it is not given to you, it is called forth from within you, strike by strike, wound by wound, choice by choice. Every time you refuse the lie and choose the truth, every time you step through fear and into awareness, every time you carry love through darkness, the forge glows brighter, and something eternal begins to take shape. That is spiritual evolution, and not everyone chooses it. You must understand this. Evolution is not automatic. You are not ascending just because time is passing. You do not become wiser just because you age. Growth is not guaranteed. Many live and die repeating the same reactions, the same wounds, the same patterns. They return to the earth no different than when they arrived, except more hardened, more numb. But others choose to wake up. And in doing so, they begin to move beyond the mechanical repetition of survival. They begin to see their life not as a sequence of events, but as a classroom. Every heartbreak becomes a teacher. Every failure, an invitation. Every joy, a glimpse into the divine. They no longer run from their pain, they mine it. They no longer chase validation, they seek authenticity. They no longer fear the unknown, they walk toward it, trembling and open. These are the ones who become truly human, because true humanity is not an accident of birth, it is a state of being, a quality of consciousness, a fierce, trembling, sacred commitment to becoming more than you were, not for approval, not for reward, but because your soul demands it. And yet, this path is lonely, because when you begin to awaken, you see the slumber all around you. You start to notice how many people are asleep behind their eyes, how many recite instead of reflect, how many follow instead of feel, and it can break your heart, not in judgment, but in grief, because you realize that while we all wear the same form, we do not all carry the same fire. This is why so much of the world feels disconnected, why conversations often feel hollow, why gatherings, rituals, even relationships can leave you with a strange emptiness, because you're reaching for depth and finding performance. You're offering soul and receiving echo, and it hurts, because something in you knows how much more there could be. But here's the sacred secret. The more you choose to live as a soul, the more you become a mirror, a catalyst, a doorway. Not everyone will step through it, but some will, and your very presence will awaken what was dormant in them. Your truth will shake loose their illusions. Your silence will call forth their longing. Your becoming will remind them that they too were meant for more. That is the highest form of service. Not to save others, not to fix them, but to embody what is possible, to be human, not as the world defines it, but as the soul demands it, to walk the earth with fire in your chest and humility in your step, to let your life become the very forge from which others begin to shape their own. And it starts with a question: am I living from the surface or from the center? Do I follow the path handed to me, or the one carved from silence? Have I accepted the illusion of being human, or am I daring to become human? Because to become human is the greatest revolution, the rarest initiation, the most sacred work. It is not loud, it is not easy, it does not reward you with comfort, but it does grant you presence, clarity, depth, and the quiet knowing that, no matter how lost the world may seem, you are real, you are awake, you are walking the path not of form, but of fire. And in that you are never alone. You are what the world forgot. You are what the world needs to remember. Not everyone will understand, but some will feel it, instantly, wordlessly, when they meet you, and in that moment they too will begin to remember what it means to be human. There's a sorrow that comes with awakening, not the sorrow of pain or failure, but of recognition, of seeing the world as it is, not as you once believed it to be, because when you open your inner eyes, when your soul begins to burn through the fog of illusion, you no longer see people as simply good or bad, right or wrong, awakened or asleep. You begin to see something far more haunting, that some are incomplete, not broken, not evil, just unfinished, and perhaps never to be finished. The ancient esoteric traditions did not shy away from this truth. They spoke of it in hushed tones, with solemn reverence. In the teachings of Theosophy, Gnosticism, and the deeper layers of Eastern mysticism, there exists a concept that most of the world is not ready to face, that not all human forms carry the same potential for spiritual evolution, that while every soul has the possibility to awaken, not every form is being moved by that possibility, and worse, some never will be. These are the incomplete ones, beings who wear the shape of humanity but lack the inner architecture to truly become it. They are animated by prana, governed by instinct, capable of logic, even mimicry, but the seed of soul either lies dormant or has been passed over entirely. To them, life is merely sensation, repetition, and survival. There is no seeking, no turning inward, no thirst for meaning. If you speak of soul, they smile politely or laugh awkwardly, not out of malice, but because they do not know what you mean. This is not a moral failure, it is not about sin or punishment, it is about development, or the lack of it. Just as a body that never matures cannot carry out the functions of adulthood, a spirit that never awakens cannot carry the light of truth. And while this reality may feel cruel, it is not without order. In the esoteric view, all beings are given the opportunity to evolve, but choice plays a role, not once, not twice, but over lifetimes. And here is the most disturbing teaching. Those who continuously reject that opportunity, who consistently refuse growth, awareness, humility, eventually fall out of the evolutionary stream. Not as punishment, not from wrath, but simply because the current of creation cannot carry what will not move. And so, the form is discarded. Blavatsky hinted at this quietly but powerfully. She spoke of lost souls not as those condemned by an external god, but as those who had refused to become. Beings who had the chance to cultivate soul and chose comfort instead, who were given pain to awaken them and used it only to harden, who encountered truth and spat it out, again and again. Eventually the system lets them go. In the deep metaphysics of the East, this idea is reflected in the concept of pralaya, the great dissolution. At the end of a cosmic cycle, what is unreal falls away. What is unformed returns to the unmanifest. What cannot carry the flame is extinguished. Not in cruelty, in necessity. Imagine a potter at the wheel. He molds dozens of vessels, each one holding the potential to be strong, useful, beautiful. But some never take form. They collapse, crack, or remain unshaped. He does not hate them. He does not curse them. but he does not fire them in the kiln. They are returned to the clay, to begin again, perhaps, or to remain as dust. This is the tragedy of the incomplete ones, not that they are lesser, but that they could have been more. That they had the potential for soul and did not step into it. That they touched the edge of awakening and recoiled. That they chose illusion over insight, reaction over reflection, survival over sovereignty. And you've met them. You've felt their presence, or rather, their absence. You've tried to reach them, you've spoken from your soul and met only blankness. You've opened your heart and received mimicry. You've seen glimpses, moments, where it seemed like something in them stirred, but it passed. The light flickered and then was gone, and you told yourself to be patient, to be compassionate, to keep trying. Because your soul feels for them, it wants to pull them forward, to carry them into the fire. But here is where discernment must rise. Compassion does not mean blindness. It does not mean sacrificing your light for someone who does not wish to see. You must understand, no one awakens by being dragged. The forge of soul cannot be forced. It must be entered, willingly, nakedly, trembling but resolved. And if someone will not step in, you must let them go. This is perhaps the hardest teaching of all, that love does not mean attachment, that understanding someone's emptiness does not obligate you to fill it, that not all who wear the mask of humanity are ready for what you carry, and some may never be. You are not here to rescue them, you are here to recognize them, to offer the truth, to hold space when it is sacred to do so, and to walk away when it is time. Because if you stay too long in the company of the incomplete, you begin to dim. Your fire flickers, your clarity fades. You begin to question your own knowing, your own light. You begin to forget the sound of your soul beneath the noise of theirs. And this, too, is part of the plan. A test, to see whether you will remain true to your path or be pulled into theirs. You must choose. Not with cruelty, with conviction, because while some will awaken through your presence, others will only drain it. While some are sleeping souls who need only a spark, others are shells who will never carry the flame. And you must know the difference, not to judge, but to protect what is sacred in you. You did not come here to convince, you came to embody, to carry the weight of soul in a world that has forgotten what soul feels like. And you will be tested, again and again, by those who look like you but are not with you. So, remember this. The tragedy of the incomplete is not yours to fix, it is yours to witness, and then to walk forward. Because your soul is not incomplete, and you are here to become, fully, fiercely, unapologetically. For those who can't, let them rest. For those who won't, let them go. And for those who will, walk with them, into the fire. There's a reason some people feel ancient, as if they carry the echoes of forgotten worlds in their eyes. A reason others feel new, not young in body but undeveloped in depth, as if they've only just arrived at the threshold of awareness. You've noticed it. The difference is undeniable. Some seem to burn with questions their mouths never ask, while others coast through existence on autopilot, untouched by wonder. This isn't imagination, it's not arrogance, it's the invisible scaffolding of something far older and far more precise than we've been taught. Spiritual evolution. Helena Blavatsky was one of the first to bring this concept into public discourse in the West. Though its origins stretch back into the deepest layers of esoteric tradition, at the heart of her work lies a radical idea that humanity is not a uniform species, but a layered and unfolding story, a multidimensional progression of consciousness expressed through form. She called these expressions the root races. To the untrained ear, the term might sound strange, even offensive, but it has nothing to do with race in the modern socio-political sense. It's not about skin color, culture, or genetics. It's about consciousness, about the evolution of soul substance through time, form, and experience. The root races are not physical categories, they are archetypal stages. Like grades in a cosmic school, each one builds upon the last, and not all beings are enrolled in the same class. In Blavatsky's model, humanity has passed through several root races already, each one reflecting a different level of awareness, capacity, and relationship to the divine. These stages are not just historical, they are existential. You can meet people today who are spiritually aligned with an earlier root race, Not because they are primitive, but because their inner architecture is still developing. They are not less human. They are simply younger in the evolution of soul. This concept shatters the illusion of sameness. It explains why some people feel like they're operating from an entirely different frequency, because they are. They're playing a different game, living in a different octave of consciousness. And if you've ever felt frustrated trying to share your inner revelations with someone who just couldn't meet you there, this is why. They are not bad, they are not wrong, they're just elsewhere on the ladder. Each root race represents a specific stage of soul embodiment. In the earliest ones, the soul is still gestating. Consciousness flickers but has not yet crystallized. The form exists, but the inhabitant is tentative, undefined, still shaped more by instinct than will. These are the ones whose lives revolve around survival, pleasure, tribalism. They react but do not reflect. They imitate but do not create. Their suffering is raw but not transformative. Their joy is fleeting because it is tied to external stimulation. They move but do not know they are moving. As the soul matures, it enters the later stages. The root race is aligned with awakening. Here, self-reflection is born. The inner eye begins to open. The human form becomes a temple rather than a cage. Pain becomes teacher rather than tormentor. These are the beings who question their purpose, who feel the pull of something higher even when they cannot name it. They are not perfect. They stumble, they fall, they suffer, but they suffer with awareness, and that makes all the difference. You can sense the difference in how people suffer. Some collapse under it. They grow bitter, hard, reactive, they blame. Others break open, they dig, they weep, they ask questions that burn. They rebuild, they rise, not because it's easy, but because something in them refuses to stay asleep. That something is the whisper of a soul that has walked through many fires and remembers, even in silence, that it is here for more. Blavatsky didn't invent these ideas. She retrieved them from the Vedas, from ancient Egyptian knowledge, from the secret schools of Tibet and Chaldea. She gave language to something timeless, that spirit evolves through stages, and that not all spirits have reached the same level of integration. Some are seedlings, some are saplings, some are old oaks, and while all deserve respect, not all offer the same fruit. This is where biology and metaphysics intertwine, because while the body is shaped by genetics, the life within the body is shaped by karma, by effort, by the long arc of incarnation. You may be standing next to someone your same age, culture, or profession, but their inner being may be hundreds, even thousands of soul years behind yours. And again, this is not a hierarchy of ego. This is not about domination. It is simply what is. Think of humanity not as a single species, but as a river with many currents. Some are shallow, some are deep. Some rush forward, others swirl in eddies of confusion and stagnation, and some flow directly into the sea of source. You can tell who's in what current by the way they live, by the way they respond to suffering, by the way they seek truth. Some avoid it, some tolerate it, some chase it like a starving animal in the dark. That hunger, that restless, aching drive to know, is the signature of a mature soul. It's why no matter how much the world preaches equality, you've always sensed that something deeper was going on, that not everyone is experiencing life in the same way, that not everyone hears the same inner call, that some are still trying to master the basics, while others are working through advanced initiations of love, detachment, and selfless service. You are not crazy for noticing this. You are not elitist. You are awake. And with awakening comes responsibility, because when you understand that people are at different stages, you stop expecting the same behavior from everyone. You stop demanding wisdom from those who have not yet grown the capacity for it. You stop being shocked when someone betrays, lies, attacks, forgets. You begin to see the world not through the lens of fairness, but through the lens of evolution. You also stop needing to convince, to force others to see what you see, to beg them to rise, because you know everyone blooms in their own time or doesn't, and your job is not to pull them forward, but to walk your path fully and fiercely enough that they want to follow. That's the only way it ever works. Soul cannot be installed, it must be earned. And this understanding brings compassion, not the soft pity of the superior, but the grounded compassion of the seer. You recognize who is truly capable of growth and who is still too young, too rigid, too unfinished. and with that recognition comes peace. You release the need to change the unchangeable. You focus on where the light can reach. You give your energy not to argument, but to embodiment. This is what it means to walk the path of the older soul. To live with open eyes, to honor the river, even when it moves slowly, to accept the unfinished, even as you strive toward completion, to know that spiritual evolution is real, not as a metaphor, but as a map, one that explains not only the world around you, but the quiet, aching world within you. You are not alone on this path. There are others, and together you are not just evolving, you are remembering who you were, what you carry, and why you came. From the moment you took your first breath, the programming began. It wrapped around you in lullabies and bedtime stories, in the soft, sweet voices of caretakers and teachers who didn't know they were reciting spells. It came through cartoons, songs, slogans, all whispering the same seductive lie. Everyone is the same. Everyone is good. Everyone is equal. Everyone is here for the same reasons, driven by the same inner world, filled with the same light. And because you were young, open, trusting, unguarded, you believed it. You absorbed it like water into a sponge. The myth of spiritual equality became not just an idea you accepted, but a lens you wore, a filter through which you were taught to see the world. But something deep in you always questioned it, didn't it? Even as a child, you noticed things you weren't supposed to see. You sensed that some people felt different, not just in personality, but in depth. Some seemed to shine from the inside out, while others seemed hollow, like echoes of people rather than people themselves. But whenever you brought this up, even gently, you were told to be kind, to stop judging, to treat everyone the same. And so you did. You silenced the voice of inner knowing. You called it mean, or wrong, or just a feeling. You told yourself to trust what the adults said. You were taught that goodness lies in not noticing differences, in believing that everyone thinks, feels, and suffers like you. That's what made you a good person. Someone who didn't see hierarchy, someone who didn't discriminate, someone who didn't ask hard questions about inner reality. And so, over time, the soul's eye began to close. Because what you were really being trained to do, though no one would ever call it this, was to ignore your intuition. You were taught to shut down the subtle radar that senses presence, the part of you that could feel when a person was truly there and when they weren't, that could detect the difference between genuine love and emotional mimicry, between self-awareness and social performance. You were programmed to override that radar with polite words and shallow affirmations. Everyone's doing their best. We're all human. They mean well. Phrases that sound virtuous on the surface, but often serve to dismiss what your spirit knows to be true. This wasn't an accident. Modern systems are built on the illusion of sameness. The idea that everyone is equal, not just in value but in consciousness, is the glue that keeps mass control intact. Because once you believe that everyone is spiritually the same, then you must also believe that all truths are equal, all choices are valid, all lives follow the same arc. And if that's true, then there's no point in questioning anything. There's nothing deeper to see. The education system enforces this early. It doesn't ask you to become yourself. It asks you to become compliant. It measures your value not by insight, but by obedience. You're rewarded for memorization, not for contemplation, for regurgitating accepted answers, not for forming dangerous questions. And at no point are you taught to look at people energetically, to feel into their essence, to notice the difference between soul and simulation. It would disrupt the whole machine. Media takes it further. It bombards you with stories that flatten humanity into a single sentimental narrative. We're all just the same inside. But are we? Really? Do you feel that when you walk through the world? Do you honestly believe that every person you pass on the street has the same depth of awareness, the same sacred longing, the same spiritual potential that you feel pulsing in your chest? If you've awakened even slightly, you already know the answer. You know that some people carry light like a storm, fierce, undeniable, soul-rattling. And others walk through life with the lights off, repeating motions, reciting scripts, never once asking why. But you were taught not to trust that knowing. You were taught to explain it away, and so you learned to doubt the very intelligence that was meant to guide you. Politics turns this distortion into dogma. It demands that you treat every vote, every opinion, every person as equal in consciousness. It insists that the collective will reflects truth, that the crowd cannot be wrong, that you should conform to the average rather than reach for the authentic. But collective consciousness is not unified. It is fragmented. It is filled with voices that are not awake, not questioning, not rooted in soul. And yet you are told that listening to your own soul, especially when it deviates from the herd, is dangerous, that it makes you extremist, elitist, disconnected. You're trained to apologize for seeing what you see, for noticing what others pretend not to, for holding to an inner standard that others abandoned long ago. Even spirituality in its watered-down modern form often joins in. It tells you that we are all on the same path, that every being is sacred, that all energy is love. And yes, there is truth in this, at the highest level. But here, on this plane, in this world of forms and choices and evolution, not all souls are choosing the same thing. Not all are even present, and pretending otherwise is not kindness. It's blindness. You were trained to blind yourself, because sight is dangerous. If you can see that some people are shells, that they do not carry what you carry, then you begin to ask harder questions. You begin to pull your energy back. You stop giving your light to anyone with a pulse. You stop seeking validation from the unconscious. You start conserving your fire for those who burn, and the systems that rule this world cannot survive that. They thrive on your confusion, your politeness, your guilt. They need you to keep doubting what your soul knows. They need you to keep treating performance as presence, mimicry as meaning, reaction as reflection. They need you to call everything equal, so you never notice what is real. But you do notice. You always have. Even if you couldn't name it, you felt it. In classrooms, in churches, in friendships, in families, you felt the moments when you reached out and found nothing there. When your words fell into emptiness. When your presence was too much, too real, too uncomfortable for someone who had no inner space to receive it. And now, you're beginning to remember, to see through the conditioning, to reclaim the part of you that knows. Not so you can judge, not so you can divide, but so you can choose. Choose where your energy goes. Choose who gets your time, your trust, your sacred labor. Choose which conversations are worth having, which eyes are worth meeting, which souls are worth walking beside. Because you were never meant to love blindly. You were meant to love with sight. And that means seeing the world as it is, not as the programming told you it should be. You are not cruel for seeing clearly. You are awake. And the world will call you many things for that, but none of them matter. What matters is this. You have remembered what they tried to make you forget, and now you are free. You've spent so much of your life trying to understand others, trying to feel into who they really are, what they really carry, what their eyes are hiding. You've walked into rooms and instantly sensed who was present and who was empty, who was aware and who was just performing. It's a strange gift, isn't it? To see what others don't, to feel what others dismiss, to know, not in your mind, but in your bones, that not everyone is awake, not everyone is real. But this seeing, this discernment, this sacred intuition, it's not just a tool for navigating the world, it's a mirror. And eventually it turns inward. It must, because all your questions about them, about the soul as the shells, the incomplete, lead you to the most terrifying and necessary question of all. What about me? Am I awake? Or have I been sleepwalking through this life in a well-rehearsed performance? Am I living from the depths of a soul that is on fire with truth? Or am I simply reacting, repeating, obeying, animated by habits, fears, and borrowed dreams? This is where the real journey begins. It's easy to point to the world and name what is missing. It's easy to see the hollow smiles, the scripted lives, the dead eyes behind flashing lights. But it takes courage, soul-wrenching, soul-making courage to look into your own reflection and ask, am I truly alive, or am I just imitating aliveness? It's not a question of function. You can wake up on time, do your work, play your role, even meditate and chant and light candles, and still be operating from the surface. You can perform spiritual life with perfect fluency. You can say all the right words, post all the right quotes, attend all the right gatherings, and still be untouched at the core, still unlit, because the soul isn't measured by performance. It is measured by presence, by that burning awareness that stirs when no one is watching, that sacred unease that whispers, there is more. You are more. Do not settle here. So ask yourself, when was the last time you sat in silence, Not to escape the world, but to meet yourself. When was the last time you told the truth, even when it cost you everything? When was the last time you let go of a version of yourself that the world loved, but your soul had outgrown? This is the call, not to awaken others, but to awaken yourself, over and over again, because no matter how long you've been on this path, no matter how much you've read, practiced, seen, the work is never finished. The soul is not a destination. It's a forge, a continual burning away of everything false, everything shallow, everything that mimics instead of emerges. And the moment you stop burning, you start fading. This is the tragedy of many on the spiritual path. They begin with fire, with hunger, with longing, but then they settle. They find a community, a teacher, a practice, and they stop. Not outwardly. Outwardly they seem alive, but inwardly something has gone still, comfortable, controlled. The fire that once demanded truth is now contained in ritual. They are no longer becoming, they are repeating. And the soul does not thrive in repetition, it thrives in risk, in surrender, in the terrifying, beautiful act of asking every single day, who am I now? What must I let die today? What must I dare to feel, to see, to know? This is not easy work. It is sacred labor. The world will not reward you for it. In fact, it will punish you. People will call you too intense, too serious, too sensitive. They will accuse you of overthinking, of being dramatic, of needing to relax. They will try to pull you back into the performance, into the smooth, smiling, spiritually dead current of ordinary life. But you know too much now. You've felt too much. You've seen the difference between a moment that's performed and a moment that's real, between a person who is imitating aliveness and one who is carrying the weight of their soul like a sacred fire in their chest. And the question is no longer about them, it's about you. Will you carry your fire, not once, but every day? Because the soul is not something you either have or don't have. It's something you become, through choice, through presence, through courage. It's not about past lives or karmic history. It's about this moment, right now. Are you showing up from the center of your being, or are you hiding behind a mask, even a spiritual one? The path of soul is not glamorous. It is raw, it is quiet, it is lonely. You will shed identities like old skin. You will lose people who once felt like home. You will walk away from comforts, from crowds, from safety, because something deeper in you knows that you were not born to fit in. You were born to forge something real. And what you forge will outlast time. Every act of truth, every moment of stillness, every tear you let fall without trying to hide it, every time you choose presence over performance, you are building soul, not just in yourself, but in the world. Because as you awaken, you become a living invitation, a reminder to others that they too are more than what they've been told, that they too are allowed to feel deeply, to ask dangerous questions, to rise beyond the mechanical life. Your fire lights fires, your truth creates space, your being calls forth other beings. But only if it's real, and only if it's yours. So ask again, and this time don't look away. Am I alive? Or am I just imitating? If the answer scares you, good. Fear is not failure, it's a sign you're near something true. Let it burn through your numbness. Let it shake loose the layers of performance. Let it guide you back to what matters. Because the world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs real ones. Souls who are willing to be seen. Souls who are willing to keep becoming. Souls who carry the weight of this truth like a flame in their chest. This life is not a stage. It's a forge. And you are not here to act. You are here to burn. There's a moment, subtle, quiet, yet undeniable, when something shifts inside you. It's not a thunderclap. It's not even dramatic. It's more like the sudden silence after a long, dull noise you didn't realize you'd been hearing all your life. A stillness settles in, and in that stillness, you see, not with your eyes, but with something deeper. You see through the illusions that shaped your world. You see through the masks others wear, and the ones you wore too. You see how much of your life has been lived inside a story that was never yours, a dream inherited from the sleepwalkers who came before you. You see that what most call life is a performance, a series of reactions dressed up as decision. You see how you once believed that everyone had a soul, that everyone sought truth, that everyone felt as deeply as you did. And you know now that it was never true. You see the difference between presence and pretense, between movement and meaning, between those who are animated by life and those who are awake within it. And once you see that, truly, deeply, unmistakably, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending everyone is the same. You can't keep investing in hollow conversations, in surface-level bonds, in energy exchanges that leave you drained and empty. You can't lie to yourself and call it love when it's actually performance. You can't explain away the deadness you feel around certain people, not with politeness, not with empathy, not with spiritual bypassing. You've crossed a threshold. And now, every part of your life begins to change. Not because you try to change it, but because you can no longer live in the old way. Something in you has outgrown it. Not out of pride, out of truth. You simply can't fit into what you used to. It's like trying to shrink your soul into clothes that have long since torn apart at the seams. The relationships that once felt safe now feel brittle. The conversations that used to pass the time now feel like static. The roles you once played with such grace, such skill, now feel like puppetry. You look into someone's eyes and you know instantly whether they are home in there or if you're just speaking to a mask. This clarity is both a gift and a grief, because it brings peace, yes, the peace of no longer lying to yourself, the peace of recognizing truth without needing approval. But it also brings sorrow, because you begin to feel how many people you've loved who were never really there, how many dreams you built with people who were never building with you, just standing beside you, repeating motions, unable to see beyond the script. And yet, this grief is holy. It breaks you in the right places. It strips you of illusions that were never meant to last. It leaves you raw, yes, but it also leaves you real. And when you are real, something else begins to happen. You start choosing differently. You don't chase energy that doesn't respond to your fire. You don't explain your depth to those committed to staying on the surface. You don't shrink your insight to make others comfortable. You don't betray your inner knowing to maintain false peace. You walk away when something feels hollow. Not in anger, but in clarity. You no longer confuse politeness with connection, proximity with alignment, similarity with soul resonance. Was understood. Because your choices begin to reflect your soul, not your wounds. Your direction comes from your inner compass, not external reward. Your relationships are no longer about being liked, they are about being met. And those you meet now are different. You begin to attract others who see, others who have walked through fire and chosen not to forget, others who carry the weight of silence like you do, who don't need to speak every truth out loud because it lives in their eyes, in their presence, in their stillness. With them you feel at home, not because you agree on everything, but because you're both awake. And that kind of connection, soul to soul, truth to truth, is worth more than 1,000 scripted interactions. But here's the part no one tells you. Once you awaken, you don't get to rest. Because the path isn't linear. It's not one moment of seeing followed by eternal peace. It's a continual unfolding, a daily remembering. 100 tiny choices each day to live from the soul, not just to talk about the soul. And the temptation to go back to sleep, to soften your seeing, to rejoin the crowd will return again and again. Especially when you're tired, especially when the world feels loud and lonely, especially when you miss the comfort of being understood, even if it was all just pretend. But you won't go back. Not really. Because you can't. That's the thing about truth. Once it lives in your body, you can't unknow it. You can't unfeel the difference between what is real and what is rehearsed. You can't unhear the voice that now speaks beneath every moment. This is not it. Keep going. And if you follow that voice, if you let it burn through you, you become something rare. Not just someone who sees, but someone who embodies what they see. You become a lighthouse, a quiet revolution, a reminder to others that soul is not just an idea, it is a presence, a force, a fire. And every time you walk into a room with that fire still burning in your chest, unhidden, undiminished, You invite others to remember that they too were born for more than imitation. You won't reach everyone. Most won't understand. Some will mock you. Some will fear you. Some will try to put you back in the box they built for you. But a few, a precious few, will see you. And in seeing you, they will begin to see themselves. And that, more than anything, is why you were given this gift of sight. Not to separate, not to elevate, but to awaken. Your life becomes the signal, the proof, the call. And if you've heard that call, really heard it, then you already know. You are one of the few, one of the rare, one of the real, one of the ones who will not go back to sleep. Not because you have to stay awake, but because you've seen what's real. And once you see it, you can never, ever unsee it.